After working with creatives for the last 11 years, I've heard one statement more than any other. I hate marketing. I get it. It can be painful trying to figure out how to market your book or movie or comic. When I started podcasting, I had no clue how to do any of it. I was afraid of doing it wrong, looking like an idiot or making a marketing mistake that I could not recover from. It can be paralyzing. Sound familiar? If it does, let me see if I can help you. I got my MBA in marketing, so you don't have to. Sign up for a free session today to talk about your marketing goals and to see if we're a good fit. If nothing else, you'll get some insights that might ease your mind. Go to southgatesmallbusiness.com and sign up for a free session today. Welcome to Alley Chats. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Alley Chats is a virtual artist alley featuring interviews with artists, filmmakers, podcasters, writers, really any creative person you might find at a pop culture convention. My goal is to help draw attention to cool people and to hopefully help them get some new fans. I want this podcast to raise up these amazing people and to inspire you, the listener, to chase your dreams as well. You can follow Alley Chats on Facebook and join the conversation. I'll add more social media in the future, but for now, that's the best place to interact with me. You can also email me directly if you would like to be a guest or have a guest suggestion. My email is rob@smgpods.com. Today's guest is Christopher Bevard. He's been a writer of horror and crime fiction for more than 3 decades. Plus, he has one of the scariest horror book covers I've ever seen. And he's a guest at the Books and Brews event coming up this August 3rd in Evanston, Illinois. There's a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Anyway, here's Christopher. Welcome to Alley Chats. Today I have with me Christopher Bevard, or as we more informally know him, Chris. And Chris, you know what? Why don't you jump in, tell people who you are, what you do, give a little history.
You bet. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate it. I've been a horror author for about 30 years now, which seems impossible, but it's the truth. I published quite a few short stories, several novels. I write crime fiction, detective fiction, as well as mainly horror fiction. So I've got kind of a dual fiction hats there that I wear. I also have a podcasting company called Sensory Eclipse Media, and we're just about
I'm writing this one down.
Oh yeah, all the links are on my webpage too. We're about to wrap up the first season of our first podcast, which is a serialized horror podcast called Cicatrix. And I'll actually be releasing the transcripts for season 1 later this summer as a book. So that'll be
phenomenal.
I thought,
my God, you're doing everything that I always talk about with people.
Well, I figured, yeah, totally. Well, I talk to people who, a lot of people who love podcasts, but I also talk to people who are like, yeah, I can't get into audiobooks. I'm not a big podcast person. I thought, well, the podcast is essentially just a long first-person monologue, and so I'm like, it would work as a book, so why not release it that way? And I also have a lot of irons in the fire. I also have I'm obsessed with puzzles and cryptography and ciphers and things like that, games like that. So I also have a puzzle company that I launched last year called Midnight Parlor Puzzles and Novelties, and it's also on my website. And it specializes specifically in interactive narrative horror puzzle games. And we just launched and completed our first successful Kickstarter earlier this spring for a multi-part kind of horror adventure tabletop game. So
wow, I love everything.
I'm hard at work on a lot of stuff.
Okay, so we're going to get a little business out of the way.
All right, let's do it.
Because you opened it up. You kicked the door open onto the business side of things. So
right open.
First of all, I'm going to check out Sensory Eclipse because I own this big podcast network.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know anything about it, but I have.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
You have a ton of them.
Yeah. I'm executive producer of 150 plus podcasts.
Didn't know it was that
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah. And there's more to that story, which we don't need to go into here. It's not about me. But one of the podcasts I do is called Go Fund This, where when people have a Kickstarter or a backer kit, I just have you come on and talk about that. So when you have one in the future, because you're going to have
I will. Yeah, absolutely.
You've got an open door.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Unless this goes horribly wrong and I have to tell you to blank off.
Yeah, unless I'm
Uh,
shamed by the horror puzzle community, however
oh my
large.
God, yes. And then it's like, no, it's so toxic. I can't
Terrible,
have him
terrible.
back on. Uh,
Toxic fandom.
but doors wide open for that. And
That'd be great.
yeah, yeah. And then there's other stuff, but we can talk about some of that other stuff another time
Yeah,
because we don't want to
absolutely.
bore anybody. But I love it. I love everything you're saying. It's awesome.
I'm
Uh,
glad, man.
so you've been a horror writer for 30 years.
Yeah.
When I look at your Amazon, I only see a handful of books.
Yeah.
Is it that you did a lot of short story work in that, or is it like,
Yes. The short
okay,
answer would be yes. So in the night, I published quite a good many short stories in the '90s, back kind of in that golden era of small press indie horror magazines, Flesh and Blood, Mind Mares, and Cemetery Dance wasn't indie, but they were the
they
flagship
were
kind of.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I had one in there as well. But in the '90s, there were a ton of these little, kind of mail order zines. It was a big scene for that. A lot of, people just, hey, I want to start a horror zine. I'll pay you a little bit, 10, $20 for a story. And a lot of people just doing that. And there were a lot of really strong indie horror authors back then kind of getting their start with that.
Yeah. Cutting
So
their
I
teeth back
published a
then.
lot in
Sure.
there. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Published a lot during that era, and then when I was in grad school, I actually shifted to screenwriting, and so I was working with an agent who had some ties to Warner Brothers for quite a few years. We developed a number of screenplays, a couple of TV series, things like that. None of which ended up actually going into development. I guess technically some of them are still technically in development.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Development
how
hell.
that
It goes
goes.
on forever.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that for a few years and sort of sidestep fiction a little bit just because I was so focused on that. But I got, to be perfectly honest, I got really burned out on that. And I took a little bit of a break, focused on music. I'm a musician as well, and I focused a little bit more on music. The screenwriting thing was brutal. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And I will say I mean, writing those screenplays kind of to deadlines and things like that, it was a fantastic exercise in terms of writing. So it really taught me a lot as far as, being able to structure things, being able to kind of self-edit. My degree is all my degrees are in English, and I'm an English teacher essentially. So at that, it makes it a lot easier for me to kind of handle my own stuff as far as editing and structure and things like that goes. But the screenwriting gig was fun. It was just super intense.
Yeah.
In those years, I did actually write. I wrote 3 novels over the course of probably 10 years, none of which have seen the light of day. And it was the kind of thing where it was almost more of an exercise than it was an intention of releasing them. I always kind of looked at novels because I had so much experience in short stories as this just impossibly daunting mountain. What's funny is now that I've published 3 novels, the fourth on the way. I'm a lot more adept now at writing novels than I am at short stories. Something really
Uh,
flipped.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's I turn out short stories very slowly now. And
Interesting.
yeah, and I'm a lot more comfortable with novels as a format. And I don't know why that happens,
Well,
but it just something flipped.
it's funny. I've heard this. In fact, the person I just interviewed. Okay, so here's a peek behind the curtain because I
Yeah,
batch these interviews. It's not like it's happening in real time. But I
sure.
interviewed Edmund Stone, and he was saying how he was doing all short stories, and then he did his first novel, and he went. It was like he couldn't go back, and then it all became
Yeah,
novels after that. And I heard Joe Hill speak. We saw him at a con one time, and he kind of said the same thing. He didn't think he had a novel in him. And he said, here's his dad, Mr. Novel. And
cranking out 60 novels.
yeah, and he's like, I'm working this hard to get my short stories out. And he said, I really didn't think I had a novel in me. And then he wrote, it might have been The Fireman. And he said, whatever reason, once he crossed over and it started writing, he said it was like, boom, I get it. I get how to write
Yeah.
novels. And he said, you're not going to see as many short story collections out of him. Although then you've got his dad who's like, I woke up today. I'm going to write, 2 short story collections, and then I'll start on my next novel. Unbelievable.
That's some supernatural ability. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
funny. I mean, I still write short stories, and actually, my most recent book is a short story collection. It's on my Amazon page. It's called The Mystery of Lullabies. And actually, that collection, a lot of the stuff I've published years and years ago, it's long out of print, and a lot of those
Yeah.
things I was like, I kind of hated that, and so I thought, well, why not,
Let it die out in the vine and
yeah, it's like, why
move
not put,
on.
so I basically, Mystery of Lullabies compiles some new short stories that I'd written over the last few years, along with some of the old short stories that were out of print, including the one that had been in Cemetery Dance and stuff like that. So that was a nice little kind of package to put together because it kind of brought me up to where I am now as far as short stories and whatnot go. Yeah, I still write them. I still enjoy writing them. It's just I'm very slow at it. whereas I
Yeah.
used to be able to turn them out pretty quickly. Now most of that energy goes into novel work, which I'm, fine with. It's
Yeah, you don't sound upset by it.
No, it's fun. They're all. I mean, it's the same process essentially. It's just sort of, it's just a different approach to storytelling.
So were you always I mean, if you went for English and all that, you obviously wanted to be a writer
Yeah,
or involved in that world. Was it always
absolutely.
horror? I mean, it's obviously
Oh
horror
yeah.
now, but was it always
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah? So what was
Yeah,
the
I've been a
entry point?
monster kid since I was about 3 years old.
What was the thing? 3-year-old you, what's the thing that we were
I
like,
mean,
this just gripped my life?
I don't know that there's a one thing I could point to. I mean, I was just a Midwestern kid obsessed with Kiss and obsessed with monsters, and just, I mean, it was, there are probably a million other people like me.
Yeah.
Uh
I'm guessing
it's
we're in a similar age bracket because and
Yeah.
are you from the Chicagoland area?
Yeah, I'm from downstate Illinois.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Son of Svengoolie was happening for you at
Oh
that
yeah,
time?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, see, when people start talking about it with me, I bring up like Son of Svengoolie impacted us like as much as Star Wars
Huge.
impacted
Oh yeah,
us.
oh yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. So
I mean
Svengoolie was huge.
that
Uh
and the 4:30 movie.
yeah.
You come home and like ditch your homework because they're showing
Yeah.
Planet of the Apes again, and you'd be like, "It's Ape Week. I am done."
It's like, well, I'm duty bound to sit down and watch this.
That's right. And then whatever that
Absolutely. Yeah.
there was some Saturday matinee, and I don't know the
Yes.
name of it, but do you remember they showed really
Yes.
weird horror movies?
Because was it on WTTW?
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. And my like my parents, I'm an only child. They were like, "Get outside,
Yeah,
go out."
same.
And it was like, "Yeah, but
So
it's Saturday at 1 or whatever, and they're going to
yeah.
show Billy the Kid versus Dracula." There is nothing you can do to make me go
Get me
outside.
away from this television set.
Day of the Triffitt's happening today. Day
Yeah,
of the me sitting on my butt watching it is happening today.
exactly.
I mean, so yeah, I get it. There's no
Yeah.
one thing.
Comic books were huge for me. I mean, I'm still a huge comic collector. I've always been obsessed with EC. I've been an EC
Yeah.
collector for many, many years, as you
Well,
can
you've got a
see.
Tales from the Crypt shirt on. I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
and I have Tales from the Crypt all over my office. I'm a huge EC collector. Obsessed with Creep Show from the time it came out. I got
Yeah.
the Creep over there in the corner. I don't know if you can see.
Love it.
But yeah, I'm obsessed. I was really something just clicked with me when I was very, very little. I don't know. My parents were, they enjoyed horror movies. They were super supportive of it, and bought me monster toys and stuff. So it wasn't like I was having to like sneak the comics. My parents were buying me the comics.
Right,
So it
right.
was. I had a good kind of framework for getting my feet into this. But yeah, no, I mean, I've just always, it's in my DNA, man. It's just who I am.
Okay.
It always has
But,
been.
but here's the question about it. It was in your DNA, just like I'm saying it was in my DNA. But were you a scaredy cat as a kid? Like, did you see this stuff and go like, because
Very early on.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my parents took me to like haunted houses, and it's all I wanted to do was go to the haunted house, and then I would cry my
Oh,
freaking
same.
eyes out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you were that kid too.
Yeah, yeah, totally. My two flashpoint moments like that as a kid that I know were things that happened was when the first Poltergeist came out.
Uh-huh.
Love it. And you saw the commercials. It's like, oh, this is gonna be great. And I very famously in my family, I was 7 years old, and my dad, against his better judgment, was like, all right, fine, we'll go. Thinking, it's PG, it's Steven Spielberg, it's gonna be fine. Like,
Yeah.
not knowing the whole controversy over paying for the rating, and it's supposed to have been an R rating and all that whatnot. But we go packed house Friday night. We're like fifth row. I stand up at one point and turn to my father and said, "We have to leave. It'd be mean for you to make me stay."
Oh.
We did stay. We did stay. I
Okay.
will. I will tell you. I finally. He was like, "Sit down, sit down, sit down." He's like, "Okay, we'll leave. But if we leave, we're not coming back tomorrow. When you think you can." And I was like, he's like, "Well,
Right.
do whatever you want." But
He had your number because that
it's
was
not
me
worth it.
too. He had your
Yeah, I gotta
number.
sit here. I gotta sit here and ride this out.
And you wrote
But
it out even when the clown under the bed showed up.
the clown under the bed was the moment where I really felt like I might have a 7-year-old heart attack. Yeah, it was.
I
That was
think,
the moment
come
where I
on.
broke.
I at this point I have a 56-year-old heart attack when that clown comes out from under the bed. We just watched it last summer. We set it up on our deck and we watched outside. Showed my daughter Poltergeist for the first time, and
It
she's
holds up so
17 now.
well.
Oh, it does. She's 17 now, and
So good.
she's a horror writer, and
Oh,
so we're
nice.
watching it. She's like, "This is awesome." That clown comes out, and my wife and I are both like, "Nope, maybe we should turn this off." And she's like, "What are you talking
That
about? We were
clown is brutal. I don't know what it
brutal."
is specifically about that clown,
Yes.
but and part of it I think was the face change.
Yeah.
You're not like
When
for
it
me.
flashes and
Yeah, it's just, oh my God. But that, and then when I was very little, when I was like barely 3, telling all the hilarious Bevard family stories here. My dad was, my mom was at work. It was late night. The Blob was on TV. I mean, of all
Oh
things,
yeah, the
I mean, I love
50s
The
one
Blob,
though,
but
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm barely walking around, right? I'm 3 years old. I'm asleep in my carrier, and he's just like, whatever. He fed me and he's watching TV. Well, apparently I had woken up at some point and seen some of it. And it processed in some capacity in my head. The next morning, my mom, completely oblivious, gets up. We're having breakfast. She walks over. I'm eating toast, and she walks over and she's like, "Oh, honey, you've got a little blob of jelly on your finger. Let me get that." And I went berserk. I was screaming and crying and freaking out. And she's like, "What is happening to my child?" My dad gets home and she's like, "What is going on with Chris today?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" She tells the story. She's like, "I can just see your dad like, oh boy," like kind of
Oops.
doing the.
Oops. Yep.
So yeah, let me tell you what happened last night.
Oh
Yeah,
my
so yeah, the
God.
Blob and Poltergeist absolutely scarred me as a child. But beyond that, yeah, through all of that, there was still just this fascination with it, which just turned into just an obsessive love for somehow. Yeah.
Want more shows like this? We've got a lot more on the Southgate Media Group Patreon page. Some free, some paid. Plus, there's exclusive content for subscribers only. Follow the link in the show notes or look up Southgate Media Group on Patreon and check out the cool stuff we're doing over there. You won't be sorry. On August 3rd, 2024, Books of Horror is presenting Books and Brews at Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois. There will be over 40 horror authors for a book signing and meetup from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. that day. Meet your favorite authors, discover new authors, meet Books of Horror friends in real life, including the author I'm talking with on this podcast. Oh, and I'll be there too. This is an all-ages event. Food, alcohol, and non-alcoholic beverages will be available. No outside food or drinks will be allowed. Search for Books of Horror Presents Books and Brews on Facebook events for more information, or click on the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. So has horror writing, like diving in that way, has that taught you anything about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, my philosophy on horror, and if we want to get real cerebral with it, I mean, in terms of just kind of the role that it plays, I mean, obviously, we all kind of accept this idea that, horror helps us kind of come to terms with traumatic things, in some sort of safe, cathartic way, right? Um, Writing horror for me, like when I write a horror story, obviously I focus very heavily on the horror elements, and I want it to be as creepy and as disturbing as it can be. But for me, the context for that has to be something rooted in reality. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there has to be like I am not a big fan of horror that's just completely off the rails, in fantasy land where it's just like there's no possible I can't tie this to anything that feels real. You
Sure.
know what I mean? Like, and it's a sliding scale, obviously. I mean, but I think for me, when I write a horror story, when I write, whether it's a novel or a short story, whatever it is, the context for me is usually something tangible that's relatable to people. I think, the novel that I'm currently working on that'll come out probably early next year at this point, probably in January. It's called All to the Slaughter. And that novel for me, I realized as I was getting into it, obviously it's kind of a grindhouse horror slasher novel, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm really enjoying writing it. But what I realized is a large part of it is really about people coming to terms with aging.
Okay.
And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like the kind of thing I'm like, I'm going to sit down and write a novel about, Gen X getting older. But it kind of turned into that, where it's like it kind of turned into this like rumination on like what it means to age and what it means to see things change around you in a way that you don't like, right? And I think for me, those kinds of elements really there needs to be some sort of relatability in terms of what people are going through in a horror story. For me, that's what I kind of go for, and that's the challenge of it, I think.
Sure.
uh, and when you have that, it makes the horror elements that much worse. When you have people that you care about, when you have people you can relate to, and then something catastrophic supernatural happens, it's like, oh my god. So that's what I try to anchor everything with. I don't know if I always succeed, but that's what I try to go for.
Isn't that true though? It's so funny. I keep having these conversations about what horror does, how it reflects, and all that. And
Yeah.
I think that the best horror, where horror really works, is when it's not. How should I say this? Torture porn movies don't do anything
Right.
for me. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Right.
You watch them; they're visceral or whatever.
Sure.
Uh, it's the ones that tap into your fears right now. It's the books that tap into other parts of it that you go, yeah, they're talking about aging. They're
Right.
talking, it's like It Follows. Once people figured out what It Follows is, it's like that
Totally.
is
Totally.
really upsetting.
It is. That's a great. I love that movie.
So do I.
It's yeah. I thought that was I mean, I know it has its audience, but I thought that was a really underrated horror film in recent years, just because of all of that. Yeah, it's very unique. I saw a
Yeah,
really interesting article about It Follows not long ago too, talking about if you watch the details in the movie, it's sort of designed to be this story that exists out of time.
yeah,
The devices that the kids are using aren't devices that actually exist. These little
exactly.
texting devices and stuff. It's
It's kind of
very
timeless.
disconnected from reality. Like
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
but it's not like flashback bizarre.
No,
It's not
right.
like, oh, wait a minute, are they stuck in the 50s? It's like, no,
Right.
it's kind of modern age, but it could be, it's going
Anything
to go for a
anywhere.
long time.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay, there's the question. We're going to get for a hard-hitting question here, so
Oh,
buckle up.
hit me.
Top 3 horror movies, whatever you're thinking they are right now.
Oh,
Right
I
now.
could do that. I can do
Okay,
that.
let's hear it.
Yeah. The Thing, Carpenter,
Yep.
my number one. Creep Show, and then probably I would say Dawn of the Dead for me. Those,
Oh,
those are probably my top three.
not Creepshow 2. You didn't bring that one up.
I like Creep Show 2 a lot, but the first Creep Show just has a magic that
No,
it's
I agree.
you
Creepshow
can't
2
recapture.
Creepshow 2 is fun, but
It's
that
fun.
original Creepshow, like seeing that in the theater as a kid,
Oh my god, I saw it at the
mind
drive-in,
blowing.
and it
Oh,
was just it was it was just. I mean, that was true. It was truly. It sounds dumb, but that was a life-changing experience for me as a kid. Like seeing
doesn't
that.
sound dumb to me.
Yeah,
It's actually funny. A few years ago, they did a horror night at a drive-in out here, and I went to that, and they showed Texas Chainsaw, which I'd seen 100 times.
yeah.
I'd never seen it at a drive-in, and it's the first time I'm watching it, and it was like almost making me sick.
You know what's funny about that?
It was weird.
Yeah, I saw Texas Chainsaw in the theater quite a few years ago now, but I hadn't seen it in the theater before. And I had seen that movie probably, 50 times, 100 times before that. It was a completely different experience seeing that movie in a theater.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
seeing it on the big
totally.
screen with those speakers, it was almost overwhelming. I mean, it's like the
That's
scenes
what
when
I'm
they're in the
saying.
house. Yeah, it almost does make you sick. And it's not even like a gore sick because it's not gory. It's
Right.
almost like a motion sickness kind of sick. It was just a sight and sound kind of sensory thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think it was like, oh, it was bad technology, so that's why you're
No,
having.
no,
No, I think it was designed to
the
be
editing.
upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, those are all great choices. In fact, The Thing is one that I talk about a lot. In fact, on other shows when I've asked something similar, people keep bringing The Thing up, which is interesting
yeah.
to me because you're the first one that wore it on your sleeve like I do. Some are like, this one is my favorite, but I know a lot of people poo-poo her when I'm like, are you kidding me? How do you poo-poo that movie?
And what's funny is I've heard that too, and I don't know anybody who doesn't love it. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
honestly, if I had to say there was a tie between Dawn for my three spot, and this actually might edge Dawn out of the three spot, it'd be Halloween 3
Oh, good
with,
call, man.
without question.
Now
That
you're
probably is probably number 3 over Dawn, honestly. Dawn will be my top 5, but Halloween 3 is same thing. People for years, oh well, then it turns out, oh no, we all love it.
Yeah,
Like,
now people understand.
everyone loves it.
Well, I think the reason it didn't is because when it came out, we were all thinking it was going to be Michael Myers, and then you see this
Yeah.
thing that's like, it's nothing like
Oh
this.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
now you can watch it as its own standalone. It's like, this is a fantastic movie.
Oh yeah.
And it actually goes back to the original idea. Halloween 2 only happened because it was like, well, I could finish the story and
Yeah.
they want a sequel. Okay. But it was supposed to be an anthology.
Yeah.
And it wasn't supposed to be the story of Michael Myers over and over and over and over again.
Oh, and Halloween 2 is actually going to take place. The original script was an apartment building, not the hospital.
Right.
It was gonna be years later.
Have
Yeah.
you ever read any of those or heard about the unfinished or unmade Halloween movies?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've read about them. I did. I don't remember a whole lot about them, but I know there was a whole slate of unmade movies that really sounded kind of interesting.
There's one that sticks with me where somehow like he grows and becomes like, Attack of the 30-foot Michael Myers. It's
Okay,
like
that
he's
one
a
I don't remember
giant.
hearing about.
It's it's
I don't remember hearing about that.
it's crazy. But at the same time I heard it and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I so totally want to
Oh,
see
I would
this."
Yeah, I would absolutely watch that. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Did you see the Thing prequel?
Yeah,
I've had it on Blu-ray since it came out, and I have
yeah.
yet to watch it. I've heard basically people hate it, but then I'm like, but it's the Thing?
Here's the thing about that, and that's funny you mentioned that because I watched it not that long ago again. It's not one I revisit very much.
Okay,
But it doesn't deserve all the hate, I don't think. I mean, the biggest strike against it, honestly, is the CGI, which is pretty much symptomatic of the time it was made. You
sure.
can't really fault them. Nobody was really doing practical effects at that point. They're just during that little window. The monster effects are the idea behind them. The concept is cool. It's just, it's the CGI is a little distracting.
Okay.
But honestly, if the way I kind of looked at it last time I watched it, I'm like, if these were practical effects, I'd probably be really into this. I mean,
See, now that's what I
it tells
want to
the
hear.
story from before the first movie pretty well. I mean, it does a nice job of contextualizing everything, and the way it's tied to the initial, the Carpenter movie is actually it's pretty deft. I mean, they do a good job of keeping it roped in.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
the CGI is what probably killed it so that it didn't get
probably,
continued
probably,
on. There's a whole
yeah,
thing with that movie too, where I think there was a TV series that somebody was working on. There was a sequel, and they all sound like crazy. But like
yeah,
the people behind it were so passionate about the whole thing. They're like, I can't have them out in the snow with this thing just going. I have to have it. It escaped and now it's in New York, or it's escaped and now
yeah.
like. And to me, I'm like, it doesn't taint the original. I want to see all of that.
No, that's an interesting idea, and that would be the natural progression of it, of course. So, I mean, yeah, it makes total sense that that's where they'd go with it.
So, what qualities do you think make? I know I'm taking a hard right turn here, but I have a
Oh,
writing question. What
yeah,
qualities
yeah.
do you think make a good horror story?
Oh man, I mean, I think it really kind of depends on people's individual writing styles in a lot of cases. I mean, I
Okay.
think, I mean, and it also depends, I think, on what kind of horror you're talking about. I mean, if somebody who's really super into like splatterpunk is, I would hope that they would read my stories and enjoy them. But my stories, a lot of them are a little bit more of a slow burn. They're not splatterpunk, So somebody looking for that kind of charge out of the writing, that kind of graphic intensity, I mean, it's there to be had in some of my stuff, but it's not going to be the same sort of context, right? It's not going to be structurally the same. I think, a great horror story, it needs to be relatable in some way. And that's assuming you don't just want to, if you want the Son of Svengoolie B movie horror story, cool. If you just want a gross out monster story, cool. There's a lot of ways to go about that. I mean, but for me, a really good horror story, I need to feel connected to what's happening somehow. I like a slow burn. I
Yeah.
like sort of I like that just sense of impending dread that you cannot get away from. And that's what I really tried to capture in Junkman. And what I'm proud of, what I like about the reviews that I've gotten on that is that does come up. People are like, it's this that sense of dread where you just know something horrible is coming down the tracks is there the whole time, and it just builds and builds and builds, which is really what I try to go for. And I
Now we.
think, honestly, it speaks to the thing. It speaks to a lot of those movies. The thing starts out so innocuously, and then it
Oh
just
yeah,
goes to hell. As everything just goes to hell. And that's kind of the way I try to approach my own stuff. It's like,
yeah.
yeah,
So
I
when.
mean, I think a good horror story, it needs to be. I think it the more an author can kind of step back and think about the way in which a reader is going to take the events, and maybe not worry so much about the roller coaster and worry more about, what's going to really make them uncomfortable when they get up from their chair and have to go turn the porch lights off. Like what's going to really upset them? What's going to stick with them when they go, the dark street outside where they've lived for however long scares the hell out of them. That's the kind of thing I try to go for, I think. And that's maybe a very individualized response, but that's what gets me going. And that's what I try to go for. Pet Cemetery is a great example of that.
Yeah.
It starts out it's such a just whatever. It's very
Family.
isolated feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sense of dread as things go along, and the isolation becomes ramped up, and just all of the elements that were there the whole time to be had.
Yeah.
Everything just gets worse and worse. It just closes in on you. And
Have
I think,
Have you read Cabin at the End of the World? Paul Tremblay.
mhm, yeah,
That to
similar
me,
feeling.
the
Yeah,
whole book, I was like so uncomfortable.
yeah.
There's actually, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a point in the book about halfway through where something happens that is
Oh
so
yeah, I know what you're
horrible.
talking about. Yeah,
I actually wrote to Paul on Instagram a message, and I said, "Hey, Paul, I just got to page 163. Loving the book. Go F yourself." This was
I was
horrible.
shocked. I mean, that really.
So you do know exactly what it was. And
Oh,
he
I know
wrote back, he's
exactly what
like,
you're talking about.
haha. He's like, yeah, that was very upsetting to write.
I'm sure. I'm
Oh my
sure.
God.
Yeah.
It was awful. Awful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that book is, for me, one of the greatest horror books I've ever read. Like,
It's a
to me,
phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. I
it's
haven't seen
so
the
well
movie.
orchestrated. I haven't either, but I heard the movie's good. I
I
want to see
hope
those
so.
weird tools that they talk about in the book, and they have them in the movie. I'm like, I want to see what the hell that is. So tell me about
Yeah.
Junkman. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to hear Junkman. The cover is so disturbing to me. What is the Junkman?
So Junkman is a story of a middle-aged bus driver in a smallish town in Illinois, who basically is struggling with a number of things: his mother's senility, his alcoholism, failed marriage, things like that. He inherits his grandfather's house, and as he's going through his grandfather's effects to presumably sell the house and just kind of try to start over, he comes across this homemade Halloween costume that he and his sister made many years before, and it kind of opens the floodgates on some terrible memories and some obviously horrible, things go to hell quickly, as we were talking about.
Right.
And the context of all of that is that his uncle is in jail for having committed some murders, and he's known as the Junkman Killer.
Oh,
And he became known as the Junkman Killer. And the whole thing is as one might expect, the whole thing is sort of tied back to the Halloween costume in the end, and then a series of very unfortunate things occur over the course of the novel.
It's I mean, the cover alone and everything you just described is kind of what I was expecting.
I like that. Good. Okay.
Yeah, that is going to be like top of my list at Books and Brews. I'm going to
Cool.
grab this book. So that's why you're on, or that's how we came together here.
Yeah.
Even though now that I know you don't live that far from me, I think we've now created a lifelong bond.
I would say I think we need to hang out.
I do think so. We might have to go down to Horribles. Have you ever been to Horribles?
Oh yeah, Horribles is great. Yeah.
They have the TV from Halloween 3. They have the screen on when you sit there and drink your coffee. It's like, this is awesome. No, not Horribles. Brood.
The Brood.
Yeah, that's the place that has the TV. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're going to be at Books and Brews, which is in Evanston at Double Clutch Brewing Company, August 3rd. I'll put the links in the show notes. I'll put your social media links in the show notes so people can find you. Here's what I'm going to tell everybody. First of all, buy these books. Put the Junkman up on your shelf and turn it outward so you scare the hell out of everybody that walks in.
There you go.
Follow Chris, get his newsletter, give him rates and reviews wherever you can. It helps. And definitely read his stuff and share it with people. That's how we get this stuff out there and get people into it, which, or start a podcast network so you can interview everybody and make friends with them. That's what I did.
That's the long game. You played the long game.
Yes.
Played the long game.
Then also on his links, be sure to check out his podcast. That sounds incredible to me. And check out his games too. So there we go, Chris. I think we did it. Thank you so much for being on, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Thank you. And thanks to everyone watching this and everything. See you at Books and Brews. It's going to be a blast. I'm going to have some new swag too. So
new swag. I like that.
Yes, sir.
It would really help me out if you would rate and review this show on whatever platform you use to listen to this podcast. Good reviews help others find the show, which ultimately helps the people I've interviewed get more exposure. You can connect with me on social media or via email. All the links are found in the show notes. If you like this show, you'll like other shows from Southgate Media Group as well, such as Read Between the Lines, a podcast featuring insightful interviews with some of the hottest authors out there, or Go Fund This, a podcast where we interview people about their amazing crowdfunding projects. You can find our shows wherever you listen to podcasts, so give them a try. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate and review our shows. It really helps other people find them and keep our team inspired. Alley Chats is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks again for listening to Alley Chats.